good morning. My name is Chris Hart, and I am a friend of Pastor Josh's, and I guess that's all you need to know, really. You know, the friend of Josh's should be a friend of everybody's, but I've been here a couple times, and it is my honor to stand on the stage again in front of you. I appreciate that opportunity, and one of my favorite things is to celebrate people, especially friends, and I just want to honor your pastor, Pastor Josh, and Jen are genuinely some of the best people I've ever met. And I hope you know that and recognize that. I think a lot of you would come up here and say the exact same thing. But it is pretty amazing who they are. And I think I might have said this last time, but Pastor Josh has been this way since the moment anybody has met him. Well, we do have some buddies that were in college together. And Pastor Josh was like the best guy then, and he's still like the best guy now. We did a bunch of funny, stupid stuff, and in the middle of Pastor Josh being a part of that, he'd be up in the morning at like 5 a.m. breaking down the scripture and studying Hebrew and drinking coffee and being an amazing person. And I think the fruit of that, him committing to God and genuinely doing that every day, is a lot of us right here in this church this morning. So it's just fun to honor, and I appreciate you. What you see is what you get, and we all know that that's not the case a lot of the time in the world. So thank you for being that way, and to y'all, thank you for letting me come. I have a family in Tulsa. I believe I might have even mentioned at the time, last time I was here, we had 3 daughters, and so my only prayer request in the world was a son, and dadgummit, God fulfilled it. So I even brought a look at it. Grace and Brave, you know what I'm saying? Come on. Yeah, oh yeah. We do a combination of protein and creatine with the mother's milk, and we're trying to just create and breed a stallion. So it should be great. We have very high expectations. All the pressure's off our daughters. They can be cheerleaders or whatever they want to be now because we have this son that will fulfill all of my dreams. So it's all good. No pressure at all. I think it's going to be great. So, and I tell you, I come on behalf of World Compassion, and I want to say thank you for that as well. This church supports and partners with World Compassion on a monthly basis, and then even gives beyond that at times. And we work in hostile countries around the world, and I'll talk about that a little bit today. I'm going to show you a video here in just a second, but I just want to make this point. We work in hostile countries, and the strategy is we work through the local church in those countries, and that is how it is sustainable. As opposed to us kind of coming over as Westerners and kind of being the hero and giving them a whole bunch of food for a day, our goal is to systematically provide that and then work through the local church so that the local church, just like One Life impacts Alexandria and the surrounding areas, the local church in these countries like Iraq and Iran and China and Myanmar and Cuba, just like that in each of those countries, that local church is there and is the fixture there, so that they continue to do the great work and reach refugees or work in the underground church or rescue women from ISIS, all the different things that we do. But that's possible. So I just want you to have that mental picture, just like this church is gathering. It looks different, and we're going to talk about that today, man, the church being ours. But it looks very different in each country, but it's amazing how good God is in the midst of crazy persecution or very difficult times. Man, the church is growing around the world, and you from right here in Alexandria are a big part of that because of your prayers and your support and your giving to make so much of that possible. So I want to say thank you on behalf of our organization, and I do want to show you a little video, and it'll kind of take us around the world real quick and show you all the stuff that you are involved in. So let it rip.
World Compassion empowers the local church in nations hostile to the gospel. It's why we cross oceans, cultural barriers, and unsafe borders to share God's unconditional and life-changing compassion and love. Our work in Iran is one of the most challenging programs we have. Believers in Iran are imprisoned, harassed, discriminated against, and even killed. And yet people in Iran are hungry for Bibles. We have shipped over 75,000 Bibles to Iran, and Christianity is growing exponentially each year. Few countries in the world are more heavily influenced by Buddhism than the nation of Myanmar. We spent years translating and developing our ABC Discipleship and Leadership program into the Burmese language. Over 800 students have had the opportunity to study our ABC material through their local church, helping them develop into mature leaders who know God's Word and how to confidently reach their communities with the gospel. World Compassion has also equipped a local pastor in his church to start and operate an orphanage that is home to 53 children. Together, we are creating a safe place for children to grow up in a strong Christian environment that will make a lasting impact on the next generation. Today, China is seeing some of the worst persecution since the Cultural Revolution. Pastors we work with in China have been threatened by the government, their churches raided by police, and many have been put in prison. We work in the underground church to raise up new leaders and help provide materials and training that strengthen believers throughout the country. Thousands of people are coming to Christ every day. Our 2 training programs, the ABC Discipleship Curriculum and China Mission School, or CMS, are ways we meet the need of church leaders across this vast nation. World Compassion has already equipped over 3,500 trained leaders across China, with over 3,600 more currently being discipled. In the last 60 years, many churches at Cuba were forced to close. Property was seized, and the faithful have continued meeting underground, with believers meeting in garages, living rooms, and back patios to dig into the Bible. World Compassion is currently helping to plant a number of churches and build the homes that will serve as house churches for new believers and Christians in the underground church. The Syrian civil war and the violence of the Islamic State have caused millions of refugees to flee their homes, many of them women and children. In Iraq, we hold a legacy of providing aid to those in desperate need. Today, we are also partnering to operate a safe house for women who have escaped ISIS slavery. What we help provide is the safety and care they need to reclaim their lives through counseling, skills training, English classes, and a community of women to help love them through their recovery. Each World Compassion program is specifically designed to reach people for Jesus in nations hostile or restricted to the gospel. Together, we are equipping the church on the front lines of the Great Commission we all share.
It's pretty great stuff. Pastor Josh and I went on a trip, I don't know, a year ago or something, Josh? Is that how long it's been? Went and did. He helped communicate at a pastors' conference for 250 pastors in Myanmar. And all of them represent different networks, they're network leaders, and they all kind of come together and then they disseminate that information throughout. And then we also went through China and met with some of our network leaders. You talk about crazy. We actually met with a man who represents 5 million Christians. It's like, man, we got a great church, right? Man, we got 1,000 people in our church. Man, good job, right? And he is overseeing 5 million Christians. And they'll break it down. He's got 5 guys that each oversee 1 million. And then from there, they break it down into 500,000. I mean, it really is amazing that with that persecution, and we're going to talk about that, what they're able to do, man, they're trusting God and working together and seeing the fruit from it. So today, I want to go there with you a little bit. If you're looking for a cheesy title, I'm going to call this My Church because I want you to take ownership of this. I mean, if you really think about it, we were talking as fellas this weekend, since Jesus and everything that he brought to the table and those disciples that carried that fire and carried that torch, now we get to be on this planet, us collectively right here, and now it's our turn to carry that torch and carry that fire and the responsibility of being the capital C church. It's what we get to do. And it's a privilege and it's a priority and it's a responsibility that we all have to run with and do our part in. So I want to go there with you today. I want to start kind of right here. Let's go to Matthew 16:13. And let's just be proud of what we get to do. What an amazing life that we get to live. Just grateful. Man, Jesus died for us, and now we get to carry on that legacy. In verse 13, Jesus is with his guys. He's with the fellas. And it says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist. Some say Elijah. Others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Then he asked them, this is critical, but who do you say that I am? I know a lot of people say different things. I know there's people in our community that have differing religious opinions. But who do you say that Jesus is? These are guys that have been with him for a little bit. They've seen him do some stuff. So he's not saying, hey, what are the outsiders saying? Who I have a relationship with? Who do you say that I am. Simon Peter, the dude. All over the place, all over the map, confused at times, bold at times. Simon Peter steps up. Man, I think I've got an idea. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And this is a little bit of a mouthful for somebody that has kind of the checkered past that we get to see documented in Scripture. He makes some interesting points here. He says you're the Messiah, which is who was promised and who they have been waiting for. So he kind of recognizes it on that level. And then he says, and you're the Son. So he's kind of identifying the idea of the Trinity. You're a part of that, but you're also this unique portion of it as well. And then it says the living God. At the time, there's all, like there are now, there's all kinds of different gods that people could worship that were dead. And he identifies those key points and recognizes who Jesus is on the earth at that time. Jesus replies in verse 17. He says, you're blessed. My interpretation is, I'm shocked. Peter, I didn't know that you had that in you. That was a profound response. Simon, son of Jonah, he's actually calling out his heritage. I know who your dad is. Everybody does. But in this moment, you're not speaking like a normal person. Because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You didn't learn this from any human being. Verse 18, now that I say that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the powers of hell, or the gates of hell, will not conquer it. At our church back in Tulsa, we have a slogan based on this verse. If the gates of hell can't prevail against us, then that makes us tougher than hell. And it's on shirts, it's on billboards, it's this naughty little statement, but man, think about that. Man, that's who we are. We're tougher than hell. The gates of hell can't come against us. It cannot conquer us as much as it wants to try. As strategic as the devil wants to be in doing this for a long time, it won't work. We have to recognize the authority that we walk in. We are the church, and the gates of hell can't prevail. I was looking at this in the Dakes, and Peter actually means fragment of a rock. So it's a rock, yes, but it's a fragment. It's a piece of this building process. So you think about it, it's cool for us to recognize, man, God uses fragments. You may not feel like you're all put together. You may not feel like you've got it all dialed in right now. But man, just like Peter is all over the place as he was, God uses that. And if we will recognize who God is and walk in that revelation, man, revelation leads to activation. 5 verses later, Jesus calls Peter Satan and says to get out of the way. So he obviously didn't have it all dialed in yet, right? Hey, I'm going to build a church on you, but here in like 2 seconds, I'm going to call you the devil, right? So it's all good. There's hope for us. But it's pretty amazing. It's like, man, God's going to use a fragment like me. But here's what he needs. He needs a whole bunch of different fragments so there's a place for everybody in the body. Man, I'm the church. You're the church. And as unique as you are from me, I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I think this way, and this is what I like to do, and this is the kind of food I like to, all that. And you're different from that, and that's perfect, because that's what God has for us. I think about us in college. Man, think about the people that you grew up with, people, the friends that you've had. All these uniquely different people that get slammed together for a 4-year process, and you're also supposed to go to school and write papers, but man, you look at all that, and it's something beautiful. Think about your family. My 3 daughters are so different. Your kids are so different. And it's exactly what is needed to make it perfect. There's flaws in it, but it's amazing. And it's exactly what it's supposed to be. We just got to recognize that and walk in it. This is kind of cool where he goes with this. Because I think about that gives us the authority. And this past year, last February in China, they passed new religious regulations. And they're saying it's the strictest religious regulations in the last 50 years in the country of China. We kind of I heard stories growing up about China. So we're kind of back to that. And every province is a little bit different. So sometimes it's like, man, there's a lot of religious freedom because a lot of the local government have a lot to say in how they execute the law. So a lot of times what you hear in China, as diverse as it is probably true because it's 1 billion people and the local government dictate how it goes, okay? So, but they made a law that you can be fined between $5,000 and $250,000 if you rent your home to someone for religious purposes. So most of the underground church is rented apartments, and they'll meet in groups of 60 or 70. So one of our staff guys is a pastor there and had to move houses 4 different times because as soon as they would find out what he was using it for, they're like, listen, I can't afford a $250,000 fine if they find out I'm renting it to you. So they're having to move and shift locations. Then they came out and said, you can't purchase a Bible in China because we're rewriting the Bible, and there will be a government-approved and issued Bible that you can purchase. So now they can kind of move things around and make sure that it's government and then Jesus, and that's how you read the Bible. So that's happening. But here's what's amazing. The reports that we're getting back, I do a Skype call with Peter, who has the best laugh in the world, this amazing little Asian laugh that he does. And so he always starts and ends calls. He's giggling. It's all in the middle of the persecution. He said, so we've gone from meeting in a group of 70, and we broke it down into 7 groups of 10 so we can meet in coffee shops. We don't have to actually rent a location. And he's all fired up. He's like, ho, this like little Asian laugh, all excited. And he goes, man, the groups of 10 have now become between 12 and 15. So his church is small and incrementally growing in the midst of it. And he goes, and the people are loving the connectivity. Y'all do small groups. That's literally what they're having to do because of the persecution. And the groups are getting stronger and more confident and excited. And the church is growing because of the persecution. We're the church. We need the fragments to all work and come together so that we can do everything that God has for us. In verse 19 it says, and I'm going to give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. He just said, I'm going to build the church, and now I'm going to give you the keys. Whatever you forbid, bind, or lock on earth will be forbidden in heaven. What you permit, loose, or open on earth will be permitted in heaven. So now because of this submission to God, now we get to walk in the authority. So now the question comes to you, what are you as a normal human? You get to decide what you permit or forbid. And I'm telling you, the power of heaven is behind it. We were talking right before the service. Pastor Josh, it's like, okay, so am I going to permit gossip or am I going to forbid it? Am I going to permit racism or am I going to forbid it? We get that power and then heaven backs it up. He's given us the keys because we are the church, which means we are the authority. Because of Jesus. We don't get to take any credit for it. That's what's beautiful about it. His yoke is easy, so as we're being the church, we don't get the credit for it. We also don't have to take the weight of it. We're going to wake up and get after it every day. There's going to be days that, man, hit us right in the mouth. That wave might hit you, but because we're built on the rock, because we're the church, we're the ones that are standing. Man, that's the confidence we get to walk in. So number one, man, you're the church. We are the church. This is my church, my time to be a Christian, and we're proud of it and excited about it. So then number two, with that, if we're going to say, okay, I'm going to do this, my second point is we've got to man our post. I'm going to do it. If we're going to commit to it and recognize the power that comes with it, man, let's stand up and be proud of it and say, this is my spot. I'm going to take you to Nehemiah. It's one of my, hopefully you read Nehemiah like once a month just to get yourself all fired up and giggly about it. But let's go Nehemiah 4. I'm just going to make this one little point here in Nehemiah. I think you'll catch on. The little bit of the backstory, Pastor Josh will probably eloquently break this down and give you all the historical context for it at some point, or probably does every week, whatever Pastor Josh does. Best pastor in America. But the premise is Nehemiah was a cupbearer in the kingdom. He's all fancy, he's manicured, he's got hair, it looks great, all that stuff. And then he recognizes that his people are suffering. The walls have been torn down from his homeland, and he feels an unction to go and help fix it and restore it. So he does. Request of the king gives him favor, all this stuff. So they're rebuilding the walls and making it a fortified city once again. But in the midst of the building, they are vulnerable. Some of the walls aren't complete, and their enemies start to hear about the fact that they're rebuilding and recognize the opportunity to attack in the midst of their vulnerability. And I'm going to pick up here. Verse 10, the leaders of Judah said the strength of the burden bearers is failing. We're trying to rebuild the wall, but we're getting weak. And there is much rubble. We ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. So that's what the leaders are saying. This is a big project. I know we're vulnerable, but I don't think we're capable of doing it. Verse 11, here's another perspective. Our enemies, they will know or see us until we are among them. We will kill them and put a stop to their work. So we're going to creep in on them. We're going to kill them. Okay, that's what their enemies are saying. Then in verse 12, when the Jews, their own people who lived near the enemy, they said to us 10 times repeatedly, from every place you turn, they will come up against us. So the leaders are saying it, the enemies are saying it, and then their own people are saying it. There is doubt, there is unbelief. They recognize that they've got a project to complete, but nobody thinks they can do it. And this is what's amazing about leadership. And this is why you should be very grateful today that you have great leadership in place in this house. Because even when it seems impossible, I mean, if a leader can rally and recognize who they are in God, for you, it might be your personal business. It might be your family. It doesn't seem like you can rebuild your family. And when you understand who you are in Christ and the power that comes with that, you can rebuild. And you can make something out of nothing. Look at what Nehemiah does. This is pretty great. Verse 13. So, this is Nehemiah talking. I stationed armed men behind the wall in the lowest places, at the open positions where it was least protected. And I stationed the people in their families with their swords, spears, and bows. And when I saw their fear, even though he had a strategy, they were still afraid. When I saw their fear, I stood and said to the nobles, officials, the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and with courage from him. Not our own courage that you're trying to manufacture, our courage from him. Fight for your brothers. Fight for your sons, your daughters, your wives, and for your homes. See, when we remember and recognize our why, your reasoning and motivation to get up every single day and go and do it becomes much more clear. Could I borrow the fellas real quick? Pat and Luke, would you guys mind? Just join me right here at the front. Would you guys mind clapping for just some old bros, just kind of right here? Real brief background, Luke, fight night champ, 3 times in a row. Pat, the greatest ultimate Frisbee player you've ever met. Okay, now you know him, you know why we love him, right? So here's what's interesting. These are family guys. I could have picked anybody in the crowd. But what Nehemiah effectively did is he said, I know that we have holes. I know that there's gaps in our strategy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put a fella, I'm going to grab Luke, and you're going to stand in the gap. But then you remember what he said? By their families. So now he's going to put Luke's family behind him to fill this hole. Oh my gosh. I've got 3 little girls at the house. If you're going to try to get through Luke, 3-time fight night champion of Tulsa, pack a lunch because you're not getting through him because his family's behind him. Do you know what I'm saying? No, Trump's got 3 beautiful little kids. Scrawny, skinny Pat, hasn't gained a pound since college, okay? This is ridiculous. Look at him. Even when he flexes, it's ridiculous, okay? But I'm just telling you, I know Pat. I love Pat. God knows Pat. You get to know Pat after church. But if his family's behind him, there's nobody getting through that gap. But what if we took that stance every single day in our lives? Man, I know what I'm fighting for my sons and my wife. I'm fighting for that business that I know God put on my heart. Man, I'm fighting for my coworkers because I know they need Jesus. There's people in this community that need what we have. So I'm going to wake up every day with a definitive purpose and fight for that. Because I know my why. And the devil's going to attack. And it's not going to be comfortable. But they're not getting through me because I understand what's on the other side of it. You can't get through here. Clap for these guys, would you? Great job, fellas. And then, just for funsies, one of the funnest parts of that story is he says, so I just made everybody carry a shovel and a sword the rest of the time. And it's a great combo. I'm fighting, I'm digging, I'm fighting, I'm making something look pretty. It's just, man, whatever's coming at you, I'm going to fight and build simultaneously. And I believe that's how we have to live our lives. We've got some guys, it's funny, I can explain it in detail for any religious people in here. But we oftentimes will use drug smugglers to smuggle Bibles into Iran, okay? Some people are like, oh my God, the drugs, right, Josh? Drugs are bad, okay? Terrible, terrible drugs, okay? But what's interesting is they'll take drugs kind of one direction through Afghanistan, up through Iran, all that stuff, and then they drop them off, and now they have room, so we load them up with Bibles, and then they roll back through Iran distributing Bibles for us, and they can get in more trouble for the Bibles than the drugs, so they never get caught. And then oftentimes we'll use these carriers and we bury the Bible, so there's different things that we utilize. And then we have other guys that just kind of do like a transport deal for us, and they actually bury the Bibles in semi-trucks, stuff like that. So actually there's a group of guys that were doing it's all illegal, but they were doing the transport part of it to get it into Iran, and they were actually bombed. Bombs came in from Iran in this complex where these guys are that kind of are the strategists to getting the Bibles in. That entire compound was bombed. Some people died. Our main guy did not die. He was all banged up from the facility being bombed. So we reached out to him. This is, I think, right at a month ago, and just said, hey, heard what happened. So like he was sending pictures and the whole thing. We said, okay, what needs to happen now? Do we need to slow down on this? And he just said, the roads are still open. We can still get it through the checkpoints. And because of that, even though we were bombed, we have to continue this project. I've not been bombed. I've never been blown up, right? We've all experienced difficult things, but his mindset was, man, we can still go. Even though we took a hit, let's keep going. He stayed at his post, right? And so, it's just interesting oftentimes in our lives, man, it's difficult. And is this the will of God because it's difficult? And all of that. And listen, I say pray about that, seek wise counsel all the time, but I do think too often we quit because something's hard or because we're being attacked. And if we would have stayed the course, we could have actually seen the outcome we were looking for. Sometimes you just got to stay. Sometimes you just got to dig in and say, God, I trust you. I know that's interesting that verse at the very beginning of this, it applies to this. Man, your yoke's easy and your burden's light. This is a difficult process, but I'm trusting your yoke and it being lighter than it probably should be. I'm facing the trial and my faith's going to be perfected. Last point. We got to get out of here, huh, Josh? Last point. Carry your cross. We're going to be the church. We're going to stay our post. And what that's going to require is daily picking up the cross. I'm going to give you the abbreviated of this last story. I'm going to take you to kind of a critical point in history. Jesus is being whipped and beaten. It goes into pretty amazing detail. I'm in Mark 15:21 if you want to read it. It says they called together the entire Roman battalion. It's 600 soldiers. They dressed Jesus up in a ranking Roman official's robe to make fun of him and mock him. They're flogging him. They put the crown on his head. It's this wild time in history as what we know to be the Savior of the world is being mocked and is about to be crucified. He's been beaten so badly that he can't physically carry the cross. They're saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They kept beating him with the reed and spitting on him. After they mocked him, they took off the purple robe, put his clothes and let him out of the city to crucify him. And it says I'm in verse 21, they forced the service of a passerby coming in from the countryside, Simon of Cyrene, and in parentheses it says the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. All this has happened to Jesus. He's so exhausted, he can't pick up the cross anymore. So they grab a guy that's come in from the country, which means he probably wasn't privy to the whole situation, and they grab him and tell him to carry the cross. And it mentions his sons, Alexander and Rufus. So point number one, I'm going to make 3 points and pray for you, and we'll go to lunch. But number one is oftentimes you got to trust God that you are in the right place, even though it doesn't feel like opportunity. They grabbed him and asked him to pick up the cross. I picture like a big, awesome guy. And he gets up under that thing with his son standing there. And here's what's interesting. This broke me when I read this. I was reading a commentary, and it said, this is the same Alexander and Rufus that is referred to as great men of God in Romans. And it floored me. Because those two boys were standing there when their dad had to pick up the cross. And they watched him carry the cross of Jesus. And you got to think there's centurions whipping at Jesus, and their dad's in the way of it now. And they're spitting on Jesus, and now it's hitting their dad. And they got to be thinking, when it gets to the top, what are they going to do with our dad? But because they saw their dad carry the cross, their legacy carries on. Obviously, it impacted them that day, to where later in the Bible they're referred to as great men of God, because they saw their dad do it. And I just want to put that on you today. I really do. We've got decisions to make as the church. What kind of man, what kind of woman are you going to be doing in this service to God? Because there's people watching. And the proximity to Jesus is what put Simon in complete danger, and it's also the very thing that changed the legacy of his family. And I firmly believe that the closer we get to Jesus, the more we recognize and realize that we have to carry the cross every day. But to carry the cross, you have to lay everything else down. It's massive. But man, if we can get up underneath it and carry that, man, your kids, these guys are referred to in the Bible for the rest of history. And it started by seeing their dad do something that nobody else wanted to do. So today, I just want to, appreciate you. You as a church are giving to reaching the church around the world. People are being persecuted. People are they're literally bulldozing churches. Everything that's happening with terror. I mean, the world's wild. We see that every day. But the response to that, the answer to that, is the church. And that's us. So one, recognize that is you, and you've got a responsibility to be the church. And two, once you recognize that, let's stand our post. I'm not flinching. We know what's behind us. Remember your why on a daily basis. And then three, decide to carry the cross. There's difficulty surrounding that. But I promise, if you'll do it, you'll never be more fulfilled. You'll never be more at peace. And the people that you're hoping and counting on to set a good example for are going to see you do it, and they'll do it as well. Let's be the church. Let me pray for you today.